this video, we're going to look at locating what's called a midpoint of a line segment. First, we need to define that. So a midpoint is the point on a line segment that is, we say, equidistant. That just means the same distance from both endpoints. Notice it is singular. There's only one midpoint for every line segment. So here's a quick example. Suppose I have line segment AB, and I have this point M. Now, this may or may not be the midpoint. I know it's in between A and B. If they told me that, say, AM and MB were both 8, I could conclude that M is the same distance to A as it is to B, so I could then say that M has to be the midpoint of AB. Likewise, they could put those little congruence tick marks to indicate that AM and MB are congruent. In other words, M is the same distance from A as it is to B. Or they could just explicitly come out and say M is the midpoint of AB. We're never going to assume a midpoint unless they specifically tell us or they give us enough information to determine that. Now, another definition here is a bisector. In geometry, anytime you bisect, you chop in half. So a segment bisector is something that is going to divide a segment into two congruent pieces. Another way to say that is we're looking at any object, could be a line, a plane, or another segment, that intersects or passes through the midpoint of a line segment. So here's a quick example. That same line segment from before, we know that M is the midpoint because those symbols indicate that, and I have that line passing through M. So I could say that this line, whatever its name might be, is a bisector of that line segment. Now, we want to be able to locate these midpoints, typically in the XY plane, but first we're going to start off with this first case that is on a number line. Suppose we have 2 points, T and R. T has coordinate -8, R has the coordinate 2. How in the world are we going to locate the midpoint if we think of TR as a line segment? Now you could think, well, let's find the distance. Bigger minus smaller, 2 minus -8. Okay, that's 10. Well, we know we need to go half the distance. That would be 5. Then we need to go from one point to the other. So we could either travel from -8, 5 towards R. That would land us at -3. Or we could start off at +2 and travel towards -8, 5 units. That would also land us at -3. Now that works. It can be a little time consuming though. Another easier method is just taking the average. So if I took the average of -8 and 2, that gives me -3. Let's suppose we might want to do the same thing, but in a different context. How about the XY plane, the Cartesian plane? Well, it's really the same exact process. You just have to do it more than once. Since you have X's and Y's, you're going to take the average of your X's and the average of your Y's. We're going to call this thing the midpoint formula. This is something we're going to use quite a bit throughout the year, so you definitely want to be familiar with it. That's it for locating midpoints.